Hey, Robert or Kent, if you can hear us, Jesse, one of our commissioners wants to show it's a link, and he says it's fairly long, so he was hoping he might be able to give it to you in advance, if you can hear us. There.
I'll call the meeting to order. Would Commissioner Stephanie Harker please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, may we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Bergstein?
Here.
Commissioner Kerpes? Commissioner Harker?
Here.
Commissioner Gerfinkel?
Here.
Vice Chair Gregoire?
Here.
Chair Maggio?
Here, and we do have a quorum. All right, we have the agenda for this evening. Are there any corrections, changes to it? There can't be, really, but
I move approval of the agenda.
want to approve it? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. We have minutes of May the 11th. They are long, I believe.
So can I just ask the Secretary, are we comfortable that the changes that Commissioner Kerpes sent in earlier have been, that those changes have been made in the minutes?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, any changes that we received were incorporated into the minutes. If necessary, we discussed with the commissioner.
Okay.
But yeah, it was worked out.
So you're comfortable with Commissioner Kerpes' comments? Okay.
Yes.
Do we want to maybe give Commissioner Kerpes an opportunity to look at these minutes and maybe table them for our next meeting?
I texted him earlier in the evening and said as long as the rest of the commission was comfortable with it, he was fine with us
All right.
finishing tonight.
All right, so would you like a discussion on these minutes? You were not here.
I will abstain from the vote as I was not here.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right, there's a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none. Public comments? We have none, Laura?
No.
No comments. Do we have a director's report, Mr. Nguyen?
Hello, just a brief report. Looking ahead, the June 8th meeting does have an appeal. There's also, we're planning a little informational item on emergency preparedness for apartment dwellers. We also have an item on that meeting right now prohibiting smoking in rent-stabilized units. That's an item brought forward by Commissioner Bergstein. Also, please note, make a little note for yourself that there will not be any parking here at the library that night. They're setting up for Pride, so they're closing the garage. So parking would be at the PDC.
Or we could use our permits to park on the street if we need be.
Right,
for that
correct,
evening.
correct. Street parking or PDC.
Or mass transit. There you go.
Or walking.
The party bus, whatever that thing is called. Yeah.
So, street parking, we can use our passes to park anywhere?
Yes.
Any kind of meter?
Not at the red zones.
Not the red
Not
zones.
the red zone.
Meter or permitted areas that you could do. You could actually park in a yellow, you know that, after 6 p.m., and that's without a permit.
Just looking at your agenda, sir, I'm asking that I know I've been asking for this for so long, that we pull temporarily the prohibiting smoking in rent-stabilized units for the time being. I kind of feel that this is going to be a very involved discussion with the commission, one of the a weightier matter than we have taken on aside from an appeal. And we do know that we're going to have 2 new commissioners sworn in. I haven't seen the tea leaves. I don't want to start any rumors, but council has not announced the at-large appointments. Councilmember Horvath hasn't announced her, so kind of don't know what the makeup of the commission is going to be. And I think this item is so important that I'd rather have the, for lack of a better word, the new commission sworn in and then re-agendize that at the earliest possible date after that.
I would agree to that.
So we'll postpone that to a date to be determined after the full commission has been sworn in.
Will we have time to have that type of discussion, or will it take it too far into the summer?
Time to discuss what?
We're fine with pulling it. It was an item that the commissioner brought forward, asked for it at the last meeting. We're fine putting it back on the side, and we'll work with you to
Okay.
figure out a date when it's best.
Appreciate that, thank
Sure.
you.
All right,
So let me finish the report.
Oops, sorry.
So I just want to point out that we do have appeals scheduled for the June 22nd meeting and for the July 13th meeting. Traditionally, the commission has had a study session, the second meeting in July, which is on July 27th. So we have noted that on your calendar, and we haven't scheduled any appeals. So and we are open to hearing back from the commission. If you do or don't want to have your study session on that evening, it's fine, and we can look for a different date. That is my report.
Did you say to have a study session on the night of the 22nd, you said? No,
It's the 27th,
the 27th.
2/7.
And we're going to also have a public hearing that night?
No.
No.
We have July 13th is an appeal. We do not have any items scheduled on the 27th right now. We will not schedule any items. We have the study session set up for that evening. We are open and receptive if the commission wants to have their study session a different night. You are welcome to propose that. We can adjust the
I
schedule.
think the study session should be kept on that date because we're going to have the new commissioners. It would be a perfect time for us to all get on the same page. Would you agree, commissioners?
Sure.
Yes. So let's just keep it scheduled. All right, thank you. Anything further, Peter? No?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner comments? And remember, you have them at the end if you have anything specifically.
I have a few items I wanted to bring up towards the beginning of the meeting so we don't, in case we lose anybody in TV land throughout the evening. One, as a landlord, I got the packet from the city in today's mail about the change in rent registration fee and tenant pass-through. I know we've discussed that briefly, that the city, after many years, has increased from $120 per unit to $144 a unit, which now makes the pass-through to a tenant going from $5 to $6. So I had a couple quick questions for staff. I know that a landlord can raise that pass-through from $5 to $6 on a 30-day notice. They give a notice to the tenant of the increase. First question is, if a landlord is not currently charging that pass-through, are they allowed to add that in as on a 30-day notice, or would that be a change in the lease?
It's not a change in the lease.
Okay. And then second question, it seems to me, and I could be a little foggy, that seniors were able to file for a refund of the fee they paid through City Hall. Is that still a policy with the city?
Yeah, the city still does have that program. We do honor the fee rebates. It is based on the amount of money that is paid. So if you don't pay the rebate, you don't receive anything at the end of the year. We will do this. We will go back by 3 years. So if someone they qualify, but they haven't requested that rebate, they can request that rebate. Now, important to know, anyone in the Section 8 program wouldn't be eligible for that fee rebate because they shouldn't be paying the pass-through.
Is it only seniors that qualifies it, or is this also for a low-income person?
It's senior low income.
Okay, and then how would someone apply for that?
They could come into City Hall. We have the applications at our public counter.
Okay, would be so the rent stabilization counter?
Yeah, first
Okay.
floor rent stabilization counter there.
This is something they could do on an annual basis, if they so qualified?
They can set it up. I don't believe that they need to do the full application in subsequent years. We do a confirmation, which is a little simpler process.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then, let me shuffle my paperwork. I clicked an interesting article from the Apartment Owners Association magazine called Lions and Tigers and Bears, Oh My! And it's talking about residents who request emotional support animals. This is, what if someone requests an emotional support animal rattlesnake? So there's actually going to be a webinar for landlords or for tenants to dial in. to learn more about, what is and is not allowed. It's kind of been a sticky wicket with people. I think there are people who are justified in asking for this accommodation. I think perhaps there may be some who are not, and I'll just leave it at that. There is a link to get a toolkit free. We tried entering it in. It's a really old-fashioned, really long website, so we're not going to do that. But if you want more information, there is an email address through the Apartment Owner Association. It's NUPANO@NAAHQ.org. And it's an ESA toolkit. And if you missed that email address, you can call our secretary, Laura, over here typing, and she'll be happy to pass that along. And her direct dial is 323-848-6323. So it's the NAA Toolkit, Emotional Support Animals. I think it's a good resource for both landlords and tenants. Thank you.
And I suppose some people do prefer snakes.
Not me.
And lizards.
Yes.
And turtles. Okay, please.
If I may just follow up to Commissioner Bergstein's comments, I'd like to know, Mr. Manager, Peter, if we have those same forms available at Plummer Park, and if we have them available in general in languages other than English.
I will have to let you know. You've caught me off guard. We don't keep most of our forms at Plummer Park because we have over 100.
Fair enough.
And we have most of them in Russian and in Spanish. In fact, RSH has more translated forms and materials than any other division in the city.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. We have new business. We have new business now, and the first item was going to be assisting all property owners to bring their units in compliance. Do you want to kind of report on this first, Peter, and then we'll go into our discussion, or?
Yeah, I can provide the commission with a little bit of background information on what staff has been doing. I think I mentioned in prior meetings that this is a staff item. Well, the real core of this, it began in 2016. We knew approximately how many properties hadn't been registered since 1996 when vacancy decontrol took effect with Costa-Hawkins. But we didn't know the exact number and we didn't know where. And the reason why we wanted to really understand that is to confirm and be assured that in fact, those were long-term tenancies, and it wasn't that the units were being re-rented, they were turning over, but that they weren't being registered. Now, since the beginning of rent stabilization back in 1985, we have been sending out newsletters, and in that newsletter, we have been notifying landlords of the registration requirement, and we've definitely focused on that since 1996. There's some real important aspects of having your unit re-registered, one of which is the main form, the main means that the city has of being able to certify the rent, which is a requirement. It also assures and establishes the housing services that are provided, and so it allows us to assure that there aren't what would be essentially a backdoor rent decrease where the tenant loses their housing services. And we don't have a means of proving or providing evidence. The tenant doesn't have a way of providing evidence that they had that housing service when the tenancy began. So it is a very important aspect of our program. If you do not register as a landlord, if you do not register your units, you're not allowed to increase the rent. And if the rent is increased, tenants can request a rent, they can file for a rent overcharge, and they can receive up to 3 years of that past rent overcharge if the unit is not registered. So what we've done so far in the process is we pulled down all of the information in our database. We went through, we reviewed it, we've cross-checked it, and we've come up with a number that we think is We're still working a little bit to refine it to an exact number, but there's around 3,000 units, we think right now, out of the 17,000 that haven't been registered since 1996.
Really?
So,
That large of a number?
well, it's a little higher than we expected, but at the same time, we do know that we have a large population, many members of our community are long-term residents of the city. So it's not unheard of, or it's not perhaps unexpected. But one of the other aspects and considerations is with identifying these units, we can A, bring them into compliance, B, we could also outreach and provide information to folks who may qualify and be receptive to social services and other programs through our Aging in Place initiative. So we are preparing a staff report as an update to the council on the outcomes of the work that we've done so far, and then outlining in that report a method that we would like to take forward to bring the units into compliance. It will most likely include, the steps will most likely include some form of a letter or notice to any landlords that have units that haven't been registered since '96, with that information included in it. And what the letter would say is that we show a record of X number of units on your property, and we have the last tenancies on record are these dates. Please take a moment to confirm that these are the dates of the tenancies, and then list out some of the requirements. So that is kind of in a nutshell what we have done so far and what we're planning to do. That report we're looking at taking to the council on June 19th.
All right, do the commissioners have any specific questions?
First, I just want to tip my hat to you and to your staff for kind of bringing this aspect of your department into the 21st century. I know it's been a massive undertaking to get a really current, up-to-date database, and I think it's going to be a really valuable tool going forward, but I'm sure it's been just an incredible amount of work going into, so thank you. Part of my question is, let's say you notify a landlord that, these units have not been re-registered since this date, and landlord goes, oh, I never registered apartment number 2. And then they go to a tenant and say, I need to re-register your unit, I need your signature on this form. The tenant that may notify the tenant that they are then eligible to ask for the return of any increases over the last 3 years. Are we providing any information to the tenants as to that aspect of their rights at the same time, or is the information only going to the property owners? Does that make sense?
It does, and we haven't worked that out. I mean, the primary goal here is compliance with the city's law. And so we haven't ultimately worked out the entire outreach and information campaign. We do know that, in fact, we will be sending the information to the landlords. What information we would provide to the tenants is uncertain at this point. I think primarily, our primary goal is to bring the units into compliance.
So I originally brought this idea up because we see so many appeals where it's a tenant, generally there's been an issue with their unit, and they find out through talking to staff that the unit's never been re-registered, and then they rightfully apply for that money to come back. And I think we as a commission, we were unanimous, although Commissioner Kirby's wanted a little more public discussion, that it was our goal to, as you say, have all of the units in compliance. We would rather have all of our landlords in compliance with re-registration than to have appeals come before us. And we did do an action item to council, saying that that's our goal. We would like staff to assist landlords in becoming compliant. And as part of that, my idea had been, could we offer an amnesty period where if a landlord was notified they're not in compliance, if they re-registered at that point, the tenant could not file for a refund. And then our staff attorney came back and said, that's precluded by state law. We can't offer, I call it an amnesty, for lack of a better word. We can't offer that. So one of the reasons I wanted to bring this back for further discussion is recognizing that we cannot offer that to a property owner. I'd hope that if the commission agrees that we could do a resolution or a statement to council that Mr. Noonan would take with him for his presentation, saying, you know, it is also our intention to have all units in compliance. And while we realize state law precludes this type of an amnesty period, if you feel it's an important issue, you could discuss that with your lobbyists and state legislatures, because it would be a state level item, not local. So kind of a two-parter. One, again, kind of affirming that a commission would far rather have all landlords in compliance than have hearings and appeals on that issue. And second, recognizing that we're kind of hamstrung, as we are by many state laws on our rent control, that if council felt it was an important item, they could take that to state government.
Sort of as a reminder and an alert.
Kind of an affirmation of what our intent is for landlords to be in compliance, and then recognizing we can only go so far if council thinks that there should be further degree of assistance to property owners from the state level. That would be something they could take up. So kind of an affirmation and an idea.
So what we're saying is that approximately 3,000 units, is that right, Peter, are not in compliance as far as you know?
No, and thank you for bringing this up. I think it's very important to realize that right now the number that we have is simply the number of tenancies that haven't been re-registered since '96. That's not to say that someone isn't living there and has been there since '96.
So it's 3,000 have not been registered since '96.
Correct.
But
So
we don't know that there's been illegal rent increases. We don't know if they,
right.
we don't know if there was the need for them to re-register because there hasn't been a change.
Exactly. And
Okay.
so the number, I think that number that we don't have the number that perhaps we would want to hear, which is the number of units that are not in compliance. That will be a slow developing number as we determine the compliance of the units. Then we will also identify the units that are not in compliance.
And the tenants would have the right to put in claims for that reduction in rent if they were found to be out of compliance for the past 3 years?
If a unit hasn't been re-registered, a tenant can file for a rent overcharge, and it is awarded for back 3 years.
Which is those are the appeals that usually come in front of us. I mean, that's the process, right? Well, yeah, I mean, there seems to be a need to come to an ending point of how things have been going on, and then a new beginning where everyone's in compliance. And then it would seem fair to the landlords who have, kept theirs registered. That's a tough one, because some of those people are not going to, some of those landlords, a few anyway, the honest ones, who didn't realize they were supposed to be doing this for whatever reason. I know they're notified all the time, but for those, it could mean a substantial amount of an outlay to, would the process require the tenants who have been overpaying to file? Or as part of this, could it be stated that the landlord just has to do it to bring themselves into compliance?
It's interesting. I can tell you now, the way that our code is set up, we establish the rules and the regulations, and we provide support and counseling on exercising your rights, but it is the tenant and the landlord that then would exercise their rights. So in that case, right now, today, if an overcharge was to happen, the tenant would have the option of exercising their rights. But I hear your question, and it's an interesting one. Perhaps we could look at that.
And they could only go back 3 years anyway. That's already the penalty.
That can be a lot of money, though, if you have like 4 units in
That's
your
true.
apartment.
It could be.
I think we saw a a refund of $7,000 at the last time this came before us, and that's, for a small landlord, that is not an unsubstantial amount of money.
Yeah, it's a chunk of change.
Yeah.
Although maybe there could be some caveat on it that it doesn't have to be paid back all at once. It could be paid back over the next 3 years, as long as the tenant's living there, in terms of a rent reduction each month, instead of an outlay of, 10 grand.
So in increments, I guess you're saying.
Sorry?
Increments.
In increments, yeah. Because we've seen some pretty high amounts come through here, and I know one of the candidates who came to speak one night said that she didn't think $200 was a windfall, but I was thinking more of the $10,000. It was a bit of a windfall for the tenant, not a horrible thing for the tenant, but still, in keeping a balance and keeping it fair to the landlord who may or may not have been aware that he or she was supposed to be doing this. So those are my thoughts.
I've really struggled with this issue. I've been on the commission a long time, and I have expressed my dismay on many occasions when we've had these appeals brought before us in rent overcharge cases. I understand the importance of the rent re-registration requirement to the functioning of the ordinance, but I've always felt that the rent refunds are sort of a windfall to the tenant. However, the rent re-registration process is important. And my sense is that, if a landlord hasn't followed the law, there should be some sort of penalty. I was really pleased several years ago when we changed the ordinance to only allow the tenant to get a rent refund going back 3 years. I thought that made the system a lot more fair. I guess I'm pretty satisfied that the system works pretty well at this point, and I think it's fair to landlords and fair to tenants. So I'm really torn. I'm not sure what to say about this. I did support a motion a couple of months ago to, recommend to the City Council that staff study the feasibility and desirability of making some sort of change here to the ordinance that might allow for some sort of amnesty program. But, I'm just not sure that I really feel like the commission should be proactive on this issue and really push it forward. My sense is that there probably are some landlords out there that have intentionally not re-registered their units because they wanted to fly under the radar screen for one reason or the other. I don't know, maybe it was they improperly did an owner occupancy eviction, and they didn't want to re-register their new tenant, or there are some bad apples in the city that I'm sure did engage in wrongdoing by intentionally not registering their units, and I would hate to see them given any sort of amnesty. So, as I said, I'm not sure what to think about this. Again, I think if the City Council and staff thought it was, some sort of amnesty program was desirable, I would probably support it. But I think what I'm getting is, I guess I don't really support us passing a resolution to try to advance this forward at this point.
So you don't think we should be legislators, I guess?
Can I break it into two potential resolutions then, and we can discuss that? The first would be that we support staff's efforts to bring all units into compliance for registration. So just that would be the first part. And the second part that I think you're struggling more with is a language saying if council were, and I don't know how to word this, so please, Mr. Lawyer, help me out. If council were to deem that some form of amnesty program would be desirable, that they could discuss that with state legislatures.
Well, I'm not sure it's a matter for the state legislature. Maybe I didn't understand legal counsel's report back to us at some point in the past. I guess I understood that it was, the way our ordinance works, legal counsel didn't feel like an amnesty program could really work within the context
We
of
were
our.
precluded by state law. We were
Oh, it was by state law?
So that's why I'd say it would be a state legislature's.
So, if I may for just one second.
Please.
The way that I understand what our purpose here today is simply to decide what kind of recommendation we'd like to propose to the council, given what we just heard from the manager. So given what he just said in terms of their current position, which is they would like to offer a program that's simply set at this point to simply advise the landlords of their current registrations, to give them a period of discretion to go ahead and re-register. Is that correct? That's currently where the department is?
Sounds like you've captured my earlier comments
Okay.
pretty
So-
well.
Thank you. So if that's the case, then I think our job here is just to simply decide whether or not we feel like that is the right step going forward, and if we would like to make a recommendation to the council to simply go with what the department is doing, or we'd like them to ask them to consider a escalated option. So something like an amnesty. I'm not saying the amnesty specifically, but an option beyond what the department has already reached, which is they're comfortable with the idea of providing landlords with their current registrations to give them the opportunity to re-register. So if that's where we're okay with, then I think that our position should be to simply say, we support the department, we support the work of staff, and we would like the city council to consider their recommendations very seriously. If we would like something beyond that, then we should ask something beyond that. And if we'd like to take a step back, and as one of the commissioners noted, and we want to take a step back from that and simply say, maybe this isn't an issue that we should be directly involved in, these are all fair approaches. My personal opinion on this matter is that we are a commission that's been appointed to represent people. And our job here specifically is to provide counsel from our opinion as a collective group to the city council at large to help them make their decisions. With us or without us, this is going to the city council. So do we want to be involved in this discussion or not? I personally think that we must, but I can't overrule you. So if the rest of the commission feels that we should walk away from this, I completely understand. My personal approach would be, given what Peter has said, let's take that as the baseline and see if that's the level that we want to go to, and if that's what we're comfortable with. If that's all that we're comfortable with, then let's just do that. I feel like going forward in the future, it's going to be very important that as a commission, we make sure that we are involved in the actions that are taken to council, that we actually do our job and provide the council with the recommendations that we feel as rent stabilization commissioners are the most appropriate for our community. And given that, a discussion of walking away from this conversation altogether, I personally don't want to see happen. So if we can, let's go forward with what Peter has just said. Let's start with that. Are we as a collective group okay with the idea of the department publish or providing letters to each individual landlord, letting them know which units are registered and when they were registered? Is that an acceptable idea to us as a collective group?
Yes.
It is for me.
Fantastic. So if we're then to the next step, do we want to go beyond that? Do we want to reach a level of where Commissioner Bergstein has noted, which is something that I actually would be open to, which is finding a way how to not only provide them information, but also maybe recommending to council an actual tool to incentivize people. I'm not saying that we are in a position to decide what that tool is. I think that's more of a role for the staff or for the legal to decide what is the most appropriate mechanism to use. But do we want to recommend to the city council that they do implement or at least do look at a incentive tool or an incentive mechanism? Is that something we want to discuss?
Something we
Something
could take.
broad like that, I could support that.
So if let's say, for example, to discuss the idea of, let's say, a landowner or a property owner who hasn't re-registered their unit for, I don't know, let's say after they bought their unit, they moved out of the country and they had no idea, right? I'm not saying this happens, but let's just say on the off chance, I'm talking about a completely unaware landowner that's done everything to their power to re-register, right? What kind of accommodation will we feel comfortable giving them? Are we looking at time? Is that something, Mr. Manager, is that even something that we can consider? What kind of accommodations we can give them? Or are we just simply on the basis of we want to recommend an incentive or no incentive?
Well, I think that our position is that it's precluded by state law. I believe that that's what the staff attorney has sent out.
So, and then I understand that you're not the staff attorney, so if, for your best understanding, does that mean that we're not allowed to do any incentive program or just the amnesty program that we originally discussed?
You know, I don't think that, given that we've said that it's precluded by state law, I don't believe that I'm really at a point to go beyond that. It's that we've said it's precluded by state law.
And can I just go back to the first part, because you asked the manager that they'd be providing information and then giving landlords a period of time to re-register. I don't believe you're giving them a period of time. You're just merely notifying property owners of when a unit was last re-registered. There's no deadline for them to re-register. You're providing information. Would that be correct?
Well,
Because to say we're giving them a period of time would almost be, we are giving you an incentivized time to re-register with no repercussions, and we're not able to do that.
well, you have to remember, the reason why we wouldn't be able to essentially give someone a period of time is that we don't know if that tenancy has turned over. If we send these simply to the landlord, we don't. Our record is just the initial tenant, is the initial move-in date. So we don't know. We're going to be sending this letter to the landlords to say, the thought here at this point is to notify the landlords of the last record of tenancy that we have. We realize landlords' records are not always that complete and they're not always that organized. So that may, in and of itself, be a helpful tool. That also might generate landlords coming in to talk to us a little bit more. We have had some good responses at our RSO building blocks since we set it up as a landlords institute and a tenants institute. We think that this might generate more, but ultimately, like I said, it's really the goal is to get any units that are out of compliance registered. It's yet to be seen, what that letter would generate. We hadn't, though, considered any time period. We just simply need the registrations to occur.
Okay, so just to follow up, because I just want to make sure that I'm clear. And I know you've said this many times, and I just want to make sure that I understand. So any incentive is precluded by state law?
I can't answer these questions. It was the staff attorney who sent out that email, and I can just remind the commission of what the staff attorney stated.
Okay.
But I don't have that email in front of me, and so and these questions are really, I think, better put as questions to the staff attorney.
Okay. So given that this is our one and only opportunity to meet before this goes to council, as it's projected, that we can't answer these questions, do we want to maybe make a motion to the degree of if state allows, or leave that as it may? Because at this point, I don't know that we're allowed to even talk about incentives.
Exactly.
I think we can talk about it, but we can't. My understanding from the letter the email from Allison was that state law currently precludes it. So again, my intent for tonight was to affirm our support for staff's work and help trying to bring all landlords in compliance, and then if there is a way for there to be an incentive through a new state law or an adaptation of a state law, so it's realizing that we are kind of hamstrung, much as Costa-Hawkins hamstrings us on rent decontrol, we are hamstrung by state law. So two parts. One, just to affirm our support for staff in their work in trying to bring all landlords into compliance, that as a commission, we would far rather have all of our landlords in compliance. And second, if we would support, councils, if council deems appropriate, their actions for any type of incentive allowable under state law. Someone can word that better than me.
Yeah, I'm fine with recommending to the city council that the city study incentive options for getting compliance with the law. What I was uncomfortable with was recommending anything that made reference to an amnesty. But I can support like a broad,
So how would you, since Mr. Attorney, how would you word that second part? You're better at that than I am.
Well, if I may, let's start with the first
Okay,
one.
okay.
Let's word the first motion, take that for consideration, and then work the second one.
Are we making Mr. Noonan, how do we send this to council? Are we doing a resolution, a motion, a statement, an action item? How do we word this for you to take it with you to council?
Depends on how you want it brought to council. If you would like it as part of our staff report,
Correct.
You could do your resolution, take a vote, do your second resolution, take that vote, and then we can roll that into our staff report.
That'd be my preference.
Sounds good.
Do the first one. The first one was beautiful.
All right,
Pardon, motion. Sorry,
so.
secretary corrected me, take a motion.
All right, all right, so would you like to make a motion?
I'll do my best. I would move, are we presenting a resolution that the City of West Hollywood Rent Stabilization Commission fully supports staff's efforts to assist landlords in becoming compliant with rental re-registrations.
Second, good enough for me.
Wait a minute, all right, everyone's satisfied with the motion? All right, and there's a second to a motion?
Second.
yeah, that's,
All right, I think we'll have a roll call on this one, please.
Commissioner Bergstein?
Aye.
Commissioner Harker?
Aye.
Commissioner Gerfinkel?
Aye.
Vice Chair Gregoire?
aye.
Chair Maggio?
No. Okay, it's passed, and that, the staff will take that on. All right, we're going to go now to,
We have a second part of this.
we're going to the things to know, right?
No, we have a second part to this discussion.
And what is the second part?
So, Commissioner Gregoire, maybe you can help untie my tongue. Word this succinctly for council.
Let's see. The commission could move for a recommendation to the city council that it directs staff to study incentive options for gaining full compliance with the rental re-registration requirements of the rent stabilization ordinance.
That's good.
As allowed under state law. Could we add that sentence in?
Oh,
No.
as allowed under,
Who knows, so. yeah,
as
who
allowed
knows?
under the law, something like that.
Well, are we saying incentivizing the landlord?
Incentivize the landlord
Yes.
to come into compliance.
Whatever is allowable under state law, or whatever the city council feels is appropriate and is also allowable under
Under
state law.
state law, because that second part is the,
Because it's already a law that they have been
Yeah,
disobeying,
there's
right?
already one in place.
say that again, I'm sorry.
I see, it's already a law that they have been disobeying, basically.
Perhaps.
Potentially.
I mean, I would most likely agree with you because we kind of hit landlords over the head every year with a letter that we hope that they read, but we can't force them to read. So we've provided the information year after year, but, we don't know, maybe there's a landlord living in Israel that doesn't get this information. I don't know.
Right.
So I don't think that all landlords who are not in compliance have done so with malice. I think it may just be, we have a lot of mom and pop that are just not business savvy. And it may have just been an error. I think we also may find, I bring this up, that we may find some units that are in compliance that the landlord will provide the paperwork. We've had it come before us before where landlord's going, here's the stamp sheet from the city, and it got lost in the paperwork. But I think there are property owners where it's no malice, it's just not business savvy. It doesn't really excuse it. It does not. It's just kind of a fact of life.
All right,
I just have
Can-
trouble with incentivizing,
now the vice chair made a motion, and you,
I actually would prefer not to be the maker of that motion, but I was helping compose the language. If
I will,
something that
how about if I will adopt the language of the
Okay.
motion that can come
usually,
from my lips.
if you make a motion, then there needs to be a second, and then after a second
I
is
second.
the discussion.
I second. I second Commissioner Bergstein's motion, which is a regurgitation of the motion presented by Commissioner Gregoire.
All right, everyone understands the motion.
Can
And
we
there has
read
been a
it?
second. Is
Laura,
there-
could you read back
Can we read
the,
it straight through?
Is there,
Gee, why not, Laura?
you're tippy-tapping away over there.
What we have is
Okay.
that the Rent Stabilization Commission is moving to recommend that the city council consider directing staff to study incentives to encourage landlords to come into compliance as allowed under state law.
I would rather that say, because that almost sounds like we are instructing city council, and I would rather just say that we would support council's actions. I kind of want to leave it in their ballpark if they deem it's appropriate, but I'm not sure I want to tell council.
well, we could substitute a word that says we support this idea or concept.
Mr. Garfinkel?
If I may.
Suggest,
If I
suggest
may.
to council?
I personally like the word recommend, and only simply for the fact that it reinstills where we're coming from in terms of our authority as the Rent Stabilization Commission. We're not saying it as each individual commissioner, this is what we feel. We're saying this as a collective body, that as in our roles, we feel that it's the best for the public, that as a commission, we present this notion to the city council. So if that's something that we're not willing to do, then I don't think that we should do it. But saying that we support the idea, well, we don't even know if that's an idea. At this point, we don't even know if that's something that they're going to consider.
So you want to use the word recommend?
I think the word recommend is important in this case only because what we're doing is saying, hey, listen, we recommend that you do this. We're not saying you must do this. We're not saying you have to do this. We're saying that as a commission, we think that it would be a good recommendation to tell you to do this. If you, as our superiors, for lack of a better word, would feel like this is not a good path to take, then that's your discretion. But our position is that you should take this under consideration.
Well,
I prefer recommend as well.
Okay.
so
I'm fine
let's
with
do recommend, and then it will be up to the city council to make the decision.
Yes.
It's really basically that simple. All right, that was the further discussion, and I guess we'll have a roll call.
Commissioner Bergstein?
Aye.
Commissioner Harker?
No?
Commissioner Garfinkel?
Aye.
Vice Chair Gregoire?
Aye.
Chair Maggio?
No.
Does that pass?
Okay, we are finished with number A.
So that passed, correct?
Yes, it's passed.
Motion
because
passes.
It's a 3-5, and 4 makes a quorum of 7. So yes, it's passed.
Thank my fellow commissioners for their discussion. Thank you.
We'll go to B, which are things to know, which is going to be the overview of how the rent stabilization ordinance protects the tenants and actions the city takes to support tenants and addresses concerns at properties when issues arise. Mr. Nguyen, will you give a little entry to this?
Sure, thanks. It's a big title. So this really came out of some questions that Commissioner Bergstein had the last couple of meetings, and it's the questions about what are staff doing. It really actually came out of a request that staff do some work, that we convene meetings for different tenants at a building, specifically like had happened in the past when Aline Winderman was here as the director. And I had mentioned that we were doing this and that we do this on a regular basis. And I thought that it might be a good idea just to bring an item to share a little bit more about that. So I do have a little bit more. It's not all inclusive. The commission may remember that in the past, about a year and a half ago, I guess, we did have one of the staff attorneys, Jonathan Holub, and our city mediator, Joel Hecht, here. And we had a longer discussion about the item, because at that time the commission we were bringing a change to our relocation fees and our relocation short-term and long-term relocation program. So I don't have those staff members with me today, but they are certainly an integral part of this work and this group and the effort. You know, the rent stabilization staff, we have our public counter, and that's open 8 to 5. throughout the week, a little shorter on Friday. But outside of those hours, our staff will meet with tenants. We will go out and either meet with them individually or meet with them in groups in the buildings. We will convene meetings at different parks, at the Kings Road Park, Plummer, or other areas of that are convenient for community members or for tenants. When issues arise at different buildings, it's really it all depends on what area it comes in on, who ultimately starts the charge, if you will. So, but oftentimes the key divisions and departments involved are rent stabilization, certainly, community development, code compliance, public safety, mediation, social services. We loop tenants into the CES clinic that happens on Wednesday evenings and Saturday mornings at Plummer Park. And we also, the city provides free legal assistance through BetCedic to tenants and to landlords for that matter, but primarily to tenants. We always try to make the connection to the Comprehensive Services Center at Plummer Park too, when it's appropriate. Now, there are and have been some complicated issues, situations, but the city really takes it to task. And I think I had mentioned that in the case when when there's harassment, when there's allegations of harassment, it's fairly difficult for us to speak about this freely for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of that information is confidential. Almost all of it's confidential. Two, we want to respect the privacy of tenants and their ability to continue to live without having their story shared, publicly, certainly not on cameras and in a public meeting forum. So I can tell you that there have been several difficult situations, but that staff has stayed diligently on task, on track. We coordinate the effort, and it is essentially in many ways an all hands on deck when there are issues that come up at buildings. And I think we have a fairly good track record. I think I mentioned before in our annual report that there is a number listed out by the city mediator, and I believe the number is around 400 cases a year. Certainly, when you look at the number of people that call into the rent stabilization department, I think that our numbers are coming around 12,000 people a year call in. And, so we do a broad range of support, and we certainly don't let buildings go awry. So that's kind of the nutshell of information that I had, and I'll turn it over for questions.
Do you think it'll be fruitful to bring back Joel Heck sooner than later to have this discussion on how he handles this mediation? He's been here several times. I think it's always very important to hear from him, but would we want to do that again?
I'll look to the commissioners and to the commission. If you would like to have Joel come pay a visit, I'm certainly happy to see if he's available.
I would like it very much, and of course I recommend it, but I think everyone here knows Joel and respects his knowledge, and I think it would be a good idea to do that.
I'd personally like to see it happen.
All right, well, maybe we could do that. I want to sort of comment on the privacy. It's very interesting because I'm presently going through something where I need to open up everything, and it's very difficult when you come up from a family where, everything was so private. I mean, I don't even think we knew my mother's age for many years. So I respect the privacy, and I understand that part of it wholeheartedly. All right, so does anyone else want to say anything on this matter?
I liked, at our last meeting, you kind of referred to it as a task force, and I kind of like that umbrella term for it. And I want to talk about the privacy issue and how this would become an issue for your task force. We see things kind of at their worst when it comes to an appeal level before us. And on one hand, I'd like to go, after an appeal has been decided, we'll gee, Mr. Noonan, I think, the building XYZ, we've seen so many problems with that building, you ought to convene your task force. On the other hand, I think that would be incredibly inappropriate to bring up just after the appeal has been heard. So if any of us have a shared feeling that perhaps a building has become problematic and would benefit from a task force, what would be the best way for us to discuss that? Because I don't think it's appropriate to do it on camera right after an appeal's been heard.
Yeah, and thank you. I would agree with that. I think it's better. I think the more effective approach would be one-on-one. If you'd like to give me a call, I think all of you have my mobile number. If you don't, I'm happy to give that to you, but also my office number. Just give me a call and we can talk about it further. And I think that's the best approach.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go on to public comments, and we have none. All right, commissioners' comments. I know that Stephanie Harker, will be officially leaving us this evening. I think you're really a wonderful lady. Would you like to go dancing later?
Thank you. Yes, I am available.
And I would like to thank you not only how you've served here on rent stabilization, but your interest in public safety and historic preservation and all the cultural events. And we've had many discussions, senior discussions, and aging in place, and the things that happen to you and how you start thinking about your time differently. And because of that, I have something I think would be very appropriate for you tonight. This is from Alfred Lord Tennyson's Ulysses. The sounding furrows for my purpose holes, to sail beyond the sunset and the baths of all the western stars until I die. It may be that the gulls will wash us down. It may be we shall touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles, whom we knew. Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and faith, but strong in will to strive, to seek to find, and not to yield. I hope we remain friends forever, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Richard.
I know that I'm just a font. Go ahead, please.
No, please. I'll wait.
No, Commissioner Harker.
Oh.
Final.
I thought you were looking at me. Commissioner Harker.
Final.
Please.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light. Thank you, Richard. That was lovely, Chair Maggio. Again, and I said this 2 weeks ago, but it's been a pleasure. I have learned much. The staff has been incredible. I named everybody last time. I think I left out Tom Trevor. But, and then tonight I got here and there was a little thank you note, handwritten, not an email, a handwritten thank you note from the staff, and I truly appreciate that. And I'll be around. You may have more public speakers than you think. I noticed that our liaison was here tonight from public safety.
Tori?
No.
Esteban was there.
Esteban was here. And I wanted to mention that I did do my liaison duties at the Disabilities Advisory Board last night, and something that is worth repeating from that, I'm not sure it's a program we already have here in Human Services, but it's something that they're going to look at, and Chair Doré said publicly, so I'm not telling tales out of school, that she availed herself of this service. This is based on so many people living alone now, and elderly people living alone. I believe I looked up the number, there's 76 million baby boomers who are alive in this country right now. And a very high number of them who do live alone. I think it was 47% of the women live alone and 18% of men, which is good until a certain age, but there's a service now, and I think this has gone on in other areas of the county. Believe it's called TelCheck. People can volunteer, and you take a list, and each day you call to see if that person's okay. And especially if they're in an apartment and by themselves and no way to reach out to anyone. And it's just a hi, howdy do kind of call, and then if you don't get a response, you can then call the person on their list in case there's been an emergency. And if you don't get that, then the sheriffs are called to make sure that everything's all right. And I think it's something like that that again makes a smaller community feel more like a home, that we're watching out for each other in our apartments. And I think it was called TelCheck, but I don't know that that's been brought forward, but I hope when it does come there that the landlords will approve it, and that the community can get behind it. So that's all. I've enjoyed my time here, but I'm next week off to Northern California on a different route than Highway 1 since Big Sur has slid down again. But I wish you all happy trails, as someone said, and hopefully we can all, as a community, get through the next 4 years of a certain administration. And I'm not talking about WeHo's council. So I wish you the best, and thank you again. Thank you for having me.
Don't forget to send a postcard, or do they do that anymore?
I do.
Gentlemen, would you care to add any?
Go ahead.
Well, first and foremost, let's discuss the most important issue, which is, of course, certainly our fellow commissioner here, who I've already, I think I've said the majority of what I feel. But if I can, now that I have another opportunity to add to it, I will.
I'll come back next week.
Oh, please do, because, I'm never at a loss for words. So the more I can speak, But in general, I have to say that beyond the color that you clearly bring to the commission in terms of your vibrancy, your enthusiasm, and your very unique perspective, you also bring a great deal of compassion and caring for the community. And that's something that I feel is lost in a lot of government agencies. For some reason, once we step outside of the sphere of considering ourselves residents, we then take on this new perspective. But you've been able to preserve that, and that is so valuable to a commission like ours. So I just wanted to thank you for that, and thank you for the work that you've done. And I really do hope that you come back next week and the week after that, and at every meeting, because I feel like any opinion from an individual who sees the community the way that you do is valuable for all of us, and is going to be an essential part of making sure that our decisions are in line with what the community wants. So thank you for everything you've done. And then, if I may, I do have a second part. I do have a second part, if I may. And this actually goes to Manager Noonan. I just wanted to know if there was I know that we were emailing back and forth, but I wanted to know if you actually received a response from legal or not yet. You have? No?
Oh, I can cover that in my comments after the commission comments.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm good.
Commissioner Gregoire?
I'm a man of few words. It's been a pleasure to get to know you and work with you on the commission. I've really enjoyed the perspective you've brought to the commission, and I was very sad to hear that you were leaving the commission. But I hope I hope you're not leaving town, and you'll be still active in the community in other ways.
I'm not leaving town forever. Just going up the coast this time. No, you weren't here last week, David, and I said, you know, I honor the commitment that I've had for basically two meetings a month, but it makes it hard. You can tell when somebody's coming up on a milestone birthday, can't you? They start to change. But between that and truly what's been going on in the country and abroad as well, you know, if you don't go and do it now, if you don't go and travel now, you probably won't do it. And I want to take the opportunity, and I can't do that comfortably without, you know, missing meetings and things, and I'd rather not, you know, take on something that I can't fully commit to.
Well, go enjoy. You
Thank you.
deserve it.
Thank you.
You will be missed, and come back and visit and speak in public comment.
I promise.
So, I said it before, I'll say it again, I will miss our conversations, not about commission items, back and
We
forth.
can go just drive around the block a few times, Rob.
We can. Elroy enjoys your company.
Thank
But
you.
I suspect, particularly once planning stages for Plummer Park begin again, that our paths will continue to cross.
They will.
And Rob has a new car now that, you know,
Elroy.
it's a futuristic car, so you know, he let me start it up, he might let you drive it.
License plate D.
It still has that new car smell.
It does. I did have one last, I wanted to address staff for a future discussion issue, although looking at the look-ahead calendar, I'm not sure where it would fit in. The question I have is that our rent stabilization ordinance generally does not cover inclusionary housing. And while I understand a great deal of our inclusionary housing is newer, so any newer property, I think it's 19, I forget the cutoff year for rent stabilization, but we also have a couple of older buildings in the city that are inclusionary that I'd like to hear how those tenants are protected, if at all, under our ordinance. So if we could file that for a future discussion. Again, I'm not seeing anywhere through July where we could fit it in, but for a future date.
That's actually a very good idea, I think. And the year is 1997.
97 is the cutoff year?
But maybe we could have a discussion on something like that.
Well, if I may, let's make this really easy. Manager, does our ordinance cover that type of housing?
So if it's my turn in my comments.
Yep.
Is it? Okay. So we don't have any inclusionary units that are rent stabilized. Rent stabilization in West Hollywood ends in 1979. The city didn't incorporate it until 1984 in the fall. So our inclusionary units are from 1985 onward. We have inclusionary housing since 1985. It's one of the oldest programs in the state. There's a subtle aspect, because when you say it's not covered by the rent stabilization ordinance, we typically, it is. There's two sections in our rent stabilization ordinance that apply to all units in the city. That is just cause eviction protections. And for inclusionary units, it's the maintenance standards. So inclusionary is a little different. So inclusionary units aren't, they are not eligible for the hearings process, but rather than the hearings process, we work with our inclusionary landlords. There's 30 buildings that have inclusionary units in the city, and we're building relationships. We have relationships with almost all of them. With some of the older buildings, we have a weaker relationships, but we're building those. So that is how that would move. Now, I am sensing that you may have a targeted specific building in mind, and there are a couple of older buildings that we're looking at, because as we all know, buildings, regardless of who owns them, eventually do get old and they age, and they all need support and refurbishment. And the city has used different models for inclusionary throughout its history. And so there are off-site inclusionary buildings in the city, and one of those buildings, we're seeing if we can find some options to work with that owner and see if we can get some dollars together for rehab. So that's essentially it. I don't know what I would bring back to the Rent Stabilization Commission on inclusionary housing.
So I guess the kind of the question is, when a landlord re-registers a unit, that form, they check off, blinds, carpeting, refrigerator, air conditioner, the services that come with the apartment, date of registration. With an inclusionary unit, the issue that I may or may not be thinking of, it was a removal of a housing service. It was an air conditioning units that actually belonged to a tenant, so that would have been checked off on a rent registration covered by our ordinance. But
No,
since it's
well, there's a lot of complexity to that case, and it's not something to be discussed in an
we
open
just say
session.
in general, if a inclusionary unit were to remove what would normally be a housing service, an appliance or something like that, so it wouldn't come before us, but would go through a mediator?
Well, yeah, and I think that if you want a little information about that, I can share that particular case, but that is a very specific one-off of
I'm
a case.
asking more of a broad aspect.
Okay, just want to make that clear, because I think that's come up. I think you might have mentioned it at the last meeting too. But so how we approach this is we have the ability to inspect the units, and we do that on a regular basis. We go through the units. We go through the units when we first approve them and approve the project, and then we go through the units thereafter, and we will note if there's any issues, any problems, anything that needs to be fixed, and the landlords fix them. And as many people are aware, the inclusionary units are, for all shapes and purposes, identical to the non-inclusionary units in a building. And so these are very nice, high-quality units. So in that case, outside of the one-offs, which is one that you mentioned, there really isn't a need for the hearings process in inclusionary because we have another mechanism in place, which is that relationship with the landlords and the requirement to simply fix and the compliance that the landlords have in the program.
So you mentioned that you go in and do an initial inspection on these units. I know we don't have an annual or semi-annual inspection of units in West Hollywood in general. Are you saying that you do go into these?
No, I'm
one-offs
talking
build-
about the permit sign-off. This is well outside of the rent stabilization's
Permit,
purview,
okay.
but this is when the city's signing off on a building and offering the C of O, we're part of that process, and we'll sign off for the requirements for the housing.
Okay, thank you.
Was that your staff comments? Okay.
I don't think it was. I think I have two other items.
Okay. All right.
Let me finish because I think I've been too kind to answer questions. I haven't finished my items. So we did have a request from. I had a request from Alexander Gerfinkel to ask the city attorney a question, and I did that. The city attorney asked for more information. I went back to Alexander, and Alexander and I worked back and forth on what that information is. I haven't heard back from the city attorney at that point, but that's well underway. So it did go to the city attorney. We will see what comments he has. And I did hear back from staff. In fact, we do keep the rebate form for the registration fee pass-through at JFS at the Comprehensive Services Center. There's not a really good place. There is some a magazine rack at the front of Plummer Park, but outside of that, there isn't a good place for us to stock our forms. And so we provide it at the senior center where the counselors can work with seniors to have them enrolled. It is in Russian.
Beautiful.
That's all the items I have. Thank you.
So if I may jump out of turn just for a second, I would like to actually commend Manager Noonan on putting that together. I actually really appreciate the updates in both regards, and the fact that you were able to pull out that question that we asked, no more than maybe half an hour ago, is very impressive. So thank you very much for that.
The word that describes you so much is loquacious, very loquacious.
That's a good word. That's a good word.
Will everyone remain for a few minutes so we could take a picture with Stephanie, because David's here,
Of course, yeah.
and I would appreciate that. I guess we'll get Peter to do that. I think he'll say yes. All right.
Is the meeting over, or are we?
No, we're not there yet. Okay, we finished our commissioners' comments. Commissioner Bergstein asked you the questions, and you need time now for any further staff comments?
No, staff comments are over. Thank you.
Your staff comments are over. Okay, so therefore, I will adjourn this meeting till June the 8th, 2017, here in the West Hollywood Park Public Meeting Room, Council Chambers.